Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Today's date, February 23rd, 2016. You're sitting here listening to Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna with Cellar Door Skeptics. Welcome back.
That's a serious intro, man.
It is. Welcome back to episode 20. I can't believe it. I say this every time, but I can't believe we're on episode 20. In the midst of my house decluttering, because I'm moving and packing all my boxes, I've left my computer, my mics, and all our fancy gear here so that, we could continue to record these amazing episodes so that y'all can listen in.
But we're doing it in excruciating pain on a bed of Legos.
On a bed of Legos, yes. If you walk through my house, my daughters have found Legos. My 4-year-old, actually she'll be 5 next month, loves Legos. She thinks they're like the God's gift to man, I guess, if you want to call it that. I don't know how else to say it. And she does. She plays with Legos constantly. I bought my boys Legos for I don't know how many years, and they're now 13, 14 years old. They don't care to play with them. But my daughters, they love them. They take like Voldemort's head and they put it on like a Ninja Turtle, and then they take a Ninja Turtle's head and put it on Harry Potter's body, and then they turn around and they got these damn mummies that they line up around the house, and then all of a sudden Scooby-Doo comes and debunks them because they're not really mummies,
That sounds like serial killer behavior. I don't know what we should talk about for that. You putting heads and stuff and pulling them off and twisting them up. As long as they don't start pulling the head off the dog, you should be okay.
And they don't. They love the dog. The dog doesn't like them, but they do like the dog. So, but we're here for episode 20, and we want to make sure that we give a shout out to our friends over at No Religion Required, as they mentioned us in their last show. So if you have not checked out No Religion Required, make sure you head over to their page. They have an amazing show where they talk about Southern politics, religion, and pretty much almost anything you can think of.
This is the part where we do the Wayne's World. We're not worthy.
We're not worthy. But tonight we're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court nomination. We're going to do a little bit of an update on the CPO law. We're going to talk about Pascal's wager and climate change. Yep, that's going to be an interesting one. We're going to talk about the Appendix tonight for our science segment. And even though some people have complained, we're still going to do a fucking pot segment this month about the cost of legalization. And we'll do that one, closer to the end. That way, if anybody who is sick of listening to me talk about marijuana and legalization, you can just skip through that segment. Because that's what we always do, right, Chris?
We skip through it?
No, we always put segment times. Damn it, I was setting you up, motherfucker. We always put segment times in so that anybody listening to this, I understand everybody's time is precious, and we do an hour and a half, a little over an hour and a half show every week, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we put time segments in there so that you're able to go through it and pick which episode or which segments you want to listen to, and we try and break them out as best we can for you.
Yeah, I think it's the best way to do it. That's one thing I've gotten lost in the middle of a podcast. Like I see, they're going to talk about these 3 things, and you got to click, and try to find what you want. We want to, hopefully one day we'll be able to break stuff up so that you can do short little bits, and if you wanted to jump in, but right now the segment time is going to be the fastest way for you to jump around in it.
So let's do a little recap, Chris. Last week we talked about a new Michigan CPO law, and I got a little bit of flack from some people.
Flack, that's a good word.
It's about as nice as I can put it. I got confronted by an individual that had originally sparked the conversation. I mean, we did an episode where we got interested in this, and we talk about things that we're interested in. I got accused of doing monologues. I got accused of monopolizing the podcast by other people, and well, that's what we do. Chris and I talk about things that we enjoy, things that we find curious, things that we want to have a conversation about, things that interest us, and yeah, is it going to be a little bias? Yeah, you're probably going to get some bias in there. We're still skeptics. We still analyze it. I mean, look, I attack his ass on Bernie all the fucking time.
And we're not experts. I mean, we are not the source of sources to source your source for. I mean, this is us just trying to talk about stuff that we think is interesting. And so, I mean, if we I guess brandished ourselves as the place to go to get all of the information on a topic, then yeah, we would be remiss if we were not talking about the other side or giving equal time, which is one of the things that are required for major news stations, which we are not. We don't have enough time to do all that research. Like, it's hard enough for us to get really good information for the few things that we want to talk about. And maybe one day, if this turns into a little bit better thing and we can spend more time doing this stuff, then we'll be able to get everything everybody wants. But for right now, we just try our best to just have an interesting show.
Yeah, and the whole point of it is that our goal is to spark a discussion. So yeah, do I have a monologue that I went into last week? Did I go off on the CPO laws? You bet. You bet your ass I did. And I'm not even anti-gun. That's the funny thing, is I'm being portrayed as some anti-gun. And I'm actually not. But the big thing is that we want to spark a conversation, a desire to have that conversation, to go out and seek discussions. If you don't like what the fuck we say, go out and research it. Come back to us. You can send us hate mail like this individual did and say, hey, well, why didn't you have an expert on? Well, what kind of expert do you want? I talked to a constitutional law individual myself on a private Facebook message, because, that's what I do. When I do research for the show, I go and research some of that stuff. Would that person come on the show? No, they wanted nothing to do with an atheist show. They didn't want their damn name associated with an atheist show, so I didn't put them on the spot. I didn't use their name. They asked not to. But I did have a conversation about constitutional law. And it seems like the only argument, and I don't know if we said this last week or not, Chris, but the only argument that seems to come out of the CPL thing is that your First Amendment or your Second Amendment rights to be able to bear arms should not have to come with regulation. And I'm sorry, I don't agree with that argument. That's not constitutionally based. And if it is, why are we not going back to the days where you had muskets? When they created this law, when they created this in the Constitution, they didn't think, in 200 years, we're going to have semi-automatic motherfucking machine guns. Oh, in 2 years, you're going to be able to get your hands on a rocket launcher. In 2 years, you're going to be able to hold a pistol smaller than your thumb and forefinger that could kill somebody. They didn't know that. They aren't able to see into the future. They're that, what do they call those, Chris? Gypsies. They're not fucking gypsies here.
Well, one of the things that is important too is are you a literalist or are you an interpretive reader of these amendments and things like that? Because it has been determined that the Constitution is a living document, and so the terminology, these things they're regularly reinterpreted to fit a modern timeline. And so it does not say every single human should have a gun or should be equally able to get any kind of gun and concealed permits and stuff. It is mostly about regulated militias, and then everybody who's in the militias could be bear arms. That's one of my interpretations that I had heard of, and a lot of people at the time everyone was carrying because weapons were so important. So those are the interpretive arguments that we've heard. We didn't really throw that one out there too much because we didn't think we were, I guess, reinterpreting the second law or proving the second law or the Second Amendment. That's kind of a side argument to our conversation about the concealed pistol license. That was the whole point. So, I mean, if we do a show on the Second Amendment and all of the the background deep interpretations and what it really meant or what we think it really meant, then maybe we can go into that conversation. But it's one of the things that the God debates, how they're not always about the Christian God, the Hindu God, the Buddhist God. It always kind of comes back to that deistic God. It just funnels down into the spots. Like, this is the place where the gun arguments always go. It always goes to, what does the Second Amendment really say? And so we could have that conversation in the future, whatever. But this last show, when we talked about concealed permits, it was not about that specifically.
And the one criticization that came out of it, I don't think that's even a fucking real word. I say
it
some bullshit words all the time.
It's trademarked.
But one of the criticizations again that came out of it is that the regulations, they're not against regulations, they're against regulation for regulation's sake, based on unfounded fears and speculations that violent crime has been steadily decreasing, and while at the same time many of the restrictive gun laws have been repealed or replaced with liberal ones such as conceal and carry. It seems apparent that regulation is not always the answer to crime, firearm misuse, and even the potential exacerbation. So I agree, You're right, regulation doesn't always solve the problem, but regulation does solve problems. We don't live in a society where there's a small enough society people are smart, right? We don't live in a society where people are like, oh, hey, no problem, right? hey, oh, well, I'm not going to kill you today, or I'm not going to accidentally pull my gun out and shoot myself in the leg, or, oh, I'm going to do that. The statistics don't show, I'm sorry, the statistics don't show good guys with guns stop bad guys with guns more often than not.
And they don't show that proliferating guns to more people decrease usage of guns. That's just those numbers are out there. We know what the deal is. They've gotten more strict over the years. And then what happened when we had the assault weapon ban lifted? We've seen an increase, a statistical increase in mass shootings. So the data's out there. What it really comes down to is it's a worry about the government having too much power and being able to take your freedoms and stuff. So the libertarian idea of having a small decentralized government where they don't mess with you, but everyone will do the ethical, the right thing, which isn't the case. I think the regulation is part of that social contract, part of leaving the state of nature where everybody fights for themselves, an eye for an eye, and we have to have some kind of a compromise. And the gun law is a compromise thing. It needs to be somewhat in the middle. It can't be everyone for and no one gets. It has to be somewhere in the middle, and we don't have an absolute spot for it. It's always moving around, which is the way it should be. That's really where it is for all laws for me. They should always kind of be reinterpretive. Nothing should ever be so locked in stone that it'll never change. And then we can figure out what's up next the next time the law or the bill or election cycle comes through.
And so if we ever say something that upsets you, send an email over to cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com and we'll address it. If you have facts that prove us wrong and you have actual scientific studies done, send them over. We'll analyze them and we'll talk about it on the show. So, but enough about this gun law thing. The one interesting thing that happened last week on Friday was this went around Remembrance Day, right? And I don't know, Chris, if you saw this, and I'm kind of throw you a loophole tonight. But it's something that that bothers me because when we talk about politics and we talk about the Trump game and we listen to what he's saying he wants to do with building walls and moving immigrants into camps and saying, well, screw this, we should restrict more liberties, even though, supposedly he's Republican and wants less laws. But the big thing that happened, on the 19th of February in 1942 is that they authorized the incarcerations of Americans. That there was over 100,000 immigrants of Japanese ancestry that were forced into internment camps. And we could pretend like these camps were awesome. We could pretend like the government knew what it was doing. And there you go. We just got done talking about how government regulation doesn't always work. Here's a case. You're right. In this case, the government overstepped their bounds and rounded people up. Hopefully we don't get back to that. Why anybody wants to elect Trump is beyond me. Anybody who says that we're supposed to do something we did in the 40s should be, taken out of the run for presidency. Nobody should take that guy seriously. But think about this, though. The Day of Remembrance is something that we need to bring to light. We need to see these things. We had hundreds of Japanese American people, and George Takei is one of the, he's close to my heart because I'm a big Star Trek fan. I love Star Trek, love George Takei, but he brings to light a big point. He brings to light a point about that if we don't remember these things, if we don't call this out and say, hey, this happened to me, or this happened to this set of people, we're going to forget about it. And what happens when we forget about history, Chris?
We repeat it.
Exactly. We repeat it. So if we're going to repeat ourselves, what's the point of learning anything? What's the point of moving and demonstrating if we don't change? And that's the big thing, we've been talking about. Obama's big argument was, I'm going to change America, right?
Oh, that was his campaign slogan, the big, colorful face with change. One of my favorite Christopher Hitchens things that he's written was basically, whenever a new election year comes through, we have some new vapid, cantankerous, one-word slogan that takes over, that's supposed to completely symbolize everything that we want, and it becomes so simple, so ridiculous that in the future it's not even going to be a whole word. It'll just be a couple of letters, and we just got to figure out what the hell the rest of it's going to be. You mentioned the Japanese internment stuff from after World War II. Well, it immediately sparked another something that most people don't know about. There's a thing called the Mexican repatriation, and that was from 1929 to 1936. And essentially, we passed laws that said Mexicans had to get out of this country. I mean, yeah, it's a really, really brutal thing. But they say there's estimates from 500,000 to 2 million people were essentially round up and kicked the hell out. It was mostly in California, Texas, and Colorado because of proximity to the Mexican border, which doesn't make any sense for Colorado to me. But they had the state of California actually passed an apology act to those that were forced to relocate to Mexico, an estimated 1.2 million of whom were United States citizens. They were actual citizens, and because they were brown people, they were drug out of this country. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I'd seen it in a couple of documentaries or something, and most people don't know about that one. A lot of people know about the Japanese one, but they don't know how much of. I mean, it was a full-fledged deal. Like, they were concentration camps, internment camps, or whatever. I mean, they were hardcore. And the Mexican one too. I mean, we've done this a few times in the past, and it just gets more disturbing every time I learn about another one.
And I don't know how much 20 grand is worth in the 80s, but, you know, I posted a link in the description, but the government finally apologized in the late 80s, right? They finally said, I think we did something wrong here. Here's $20,000 to each surviving victim.
To each one that is still alive?
Yeah. So think about that, though. But, okay, so even if 20 grand is worth 50 grand in today's time, that's chump change compared to what happened. Yeah, is a great start. Did they do something? Yeah. But at the same point is where's our National Day? Where's our Remembrance Day? Why the fuck is that not a federal holiday? Hey, we're sorry. Here's a federal holiday. Hey,
yeah.
let's remember this. You know, hey, let's make a national holiday so we don't fucking forget that we did this, so that we don't have another president that wants to come in and say, "Well, we're going to do the same thing we did 50 years ago."
How about this? I propose we castrate Columbus Day and we impose this one. Because everybody every year, as the memes are coming, right? The Columbus genocide memes are coming. Let's have a Japanese Remembrance Day of some kind or something.
Yeah, and I agree. Let's get rid of Columbus Day because I hate it. And you know, it's funny. I grew up in a private school, and you know, here's a little story, I guess, a little sidetrack story, but. I grew up in a private school. You know, Columbus was never shamed. It was we always had these conversations, and I have an uncle who used to call me Christopher Columbus. And, like, you know, growing up, I just was like, this is an embarrassing thing. Please don't do this. I
got Christopher Robin from Winnie the Pooh, which I don't know if it's better or worse.
I get Christopher Robin, too, but mainly I got Christopher Columbus. And I never really thought nothing of it. And to this day, he still calls me that. And, you know, he's a great guy. He's actually a fucking scientist out at Chicago University. And, you know, great guy, but you
should give him a dirty blanket.
He always calls me that. And, you know, I don't know, a couple years ago, and again, I didn't know about a lot of the atrocities because a lot of the history is whitewashed. It just is.
Yeah.
And people give me shit for that. People are like, well, you're just bitching about this. And, oh, you're trying to do this, you know, say we need to have white guilt. And I'm saying, well, there should be some, for fuck's sake. I mean, for Christ's sake, that's the way it was. You know, I mean, white people did this shit. They've whitewashed history. I grew up whitewashed in that atmosphere. And you know, it's not my parents' fault. That's just what the Christian people were doing at the time. And so I didn't know about how horrible some of the atrocities were until, you know, I had a friend, you know, she messaged me privately and says, hey, you do know that meme you shared about Columbus Day, here's the real facts. No way.
Oh.
No way. So I took the damn meme down, sent an apology out, said, holy shit, I'm doing research. You know, next thing you know, now it's like, hey, fuck this. Fuck Columbus. He was a piece of shit. What a horrible individual. There's no reason we should ever commemorate that individual. Ever. He doesn't deserve it.
There's a video that was the first time that video had ever, I guess, been made or shared or something last Columbus Day, and it was especially brutal. There was a family sitting around, and like the girl had gone to college, and she had come back, and she just they said something about Columbus Day, and the whole family like looked at her and were like, "Oh no, she's gonna start talking about Columbus," and so of course she just absolutely totally ripped into it. I don't know, it was just one of those conversations, and it's just like, yeah. So let's do that. Let's make it like Japanese American Respect Day as opposed to Columbus. I think that'd be a good idea.
And so if we could go off topic one more time before we close this segment out. one more time, because there's this thing going around, and I just need an opinion, Chris. Like, if we're going to bullshit here for a few minutes before we get into our side segment, I need an opinion on this, right? I need to know why the fuck somebody started a GoFundMe for Kanye West. So did you hear Kanye West is broke, I guess? I guess he's $53 million in debt, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he has been following the 50 Cent finance plan.
So the big question is who the fuck started a GoFundMe, and why the hell do people contribute? Who gives a shit?
It's the
why
same.
Are we contributing to this delinquent asshole? I mean, I like Kanye's music. I do like Kanye's music. I don't care for some of his politics a little bit, and I don't think he's an idiot. But I just sit here and look. It's like you're a rich person, and if you're that, you were a rich person, and if you went and spent all that money and are now $53 million in debt, which I can't even imagine how anybody would let you get $53 million in debt, but somehow that happened. Why should I have to pick up the tab for this? I buy your music. I'm already picking up the fucking tab for your lifestyle.
The question I haven't heard yet is he's got $53 million in debt, but how much money does he have? Because if he has $100 million, then he is not in bad shape with $53 million in debt. If he has $35, then yeah, he's in some deep shit. But with the Kanye West thing, I mean, the people that start GoFundMes for famous people are the same people who, when someone gets forced to bake a cake for gay people, they start a GoFundMe so that bakery doesn't have to lose its money. I don't know if you remember that. Not too long ago, there was a woman who refused to do it, and they had like a $300,000 GoFundMe. GoFundMe, as far as I know, has been just saying no to those kinds of campaigns now. They're like, no, we're not going to do this. Just piss off. And I guess the Kanye one, is it making any money?
There was some traction. I mean, not $53 million worth, for Christ's sake. But, I mean, I don't know. Last I looked at it, it was like $1,000. And then somebody like shared it and said, hey, we really need to help. And it's like, what? No, I don't want to help you. Look, dude, I'm sorry. Like, even if you're suicidal or whatever, I can't help contribute to a lifestyle I'll never get to see. You know, like, I buy your music. I pay the money for your fucking music. I do that. That's my support for you. There's other individuals that walk around and look for handouts. And, if you were living in destitute, driving in a car that's 20 years old and wearing clothes that are worth less than, the shoes on my feet, fine, I'll donate to your cause, right?
If he wasn't married to Kim Kardashian, who, as far as I know, had the #1 downloaded mini phone game app thing last year. Like, she made tons of money for being a relatively talentless hack. So, I mean, he's married to her. There's money coming in. Like, he says he's $53 million in debt. Is that for the two of them or just him? Because she's loaded. She's loaded. She's got tons of money. She got all kinds of crazy. How much money do you think they made on all that reality TV? Like, they've got like 9 different shows off of that. I'm not worried for Kanye not being able to eat his super premium $300 steaks.
I'm sure that costs more than that. I mean, he's putting mink coats on his children.
That's what he feeds his dog.
Sake.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, cool. I could care less, really.
And it's just one of those things where I can't. Sometimes I just look at society and I look at how people see things, and I just want to go, why? There's people in need. There's people hurting. There's people who can't fucking make payments. I mean, we do the best that we can to help people out, and I have friends that have hard times making rent payments sometimes, and the other day we went out and I bought some other stuff along with it for them. Like, they didn't have enough money to cover some of the bill, so I paid a little bit on their bill. Who cares, right? I have a little bit of extra money. I was able to do that, but why would I do this for somebody that's willing to take and put a coat on their child that's worth more than what I make in a year? I mean, come on. Why would we do that? I don't know. Maybe we're just harping on the wrong topic. I found that so interesting that that anybody would even consider donating money to this individual.
Well, they had
it's beyond me.
It's like the bakery thing that I mentioned before. I found it. It's Sweet Cakes by Melissa.
Yes.
That was that they were like, oh, we will 100% support the discriminatory, law that says that we don't have to, or whatever. And GoFundMe is blocking these things and locking them down. So the Kanye one. Okay, first off, like, that GoFundMe for that Christian bakery got like $100,000, $200,000. I'm trying to find the number, but it's just buried in a pile of propaganda. Well, either way, it said they refused to serve gay customers in Indiana, drew nearly $900,000 off the platform. That was where they shut it down. Like, $900,000 was donated by, obviously, conservative America who agree with their views on whatever. The entire city of Flint is filled with lead. How many people around the country said, you know what, it's not cool that people are not able to drink water? Where was the $900,000 donation from the rest of the country on that? I could think that the conservatives and liberals would all be able to get together and say, listen, people are dying because the state did a shitty job. and the city did a shitty job. Where's the funding for that? No, Kanye West needs a new fucking fur coat, man.
Yeah, he needs to get $53 million in debt. And as we leave, there's a Vanity Fair article that kind of at the very end it talks about how Trump still remains a billionaire, right? We still have a billionaire running for president, and he on stage admits, basically, literally admits that it's through loopholes. And you know what he does? He just kind of goes, and shrugs, and he does the little Trump, lean and the little Trump smile, and it's like, you're right. We should close those loopholes, for fuck's sake. You are right. You took advantage of the system. You're a piece of shit, in my opinion, for doing that. But I guess at some point, it is what it is. People got to make money. You took advantage of it. My guess is Kanye will end up in the same way.
Oh, he'll make it out of there. He'll put out some kind of, I don't know, live album or something, and he'll make a bunch of money back, and he won't be hurting at all. I'm not worried about Kanye at all. I mean, he's going to come out of this just fine. He doesn't need any of our proletariat money.
So, as we walk away from the segment,
a long rant segment.
Holy shit. Segment. It was a fun segment, though.
We haven't done this this a crazy segment like this.
Yeah. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the science segment, about the appendix, Chris's favorite organ in the whole body. When we come back with more Cellar Door Skeptics, we'll be right back, everyone.
Hello, I'm Miss B. Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're
promoting secular feminism. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Like what you're hearing? Check out more Cellar Door Skeptics every week right here on Spreaker and iTunes. Make sure you come back and check out new episodes with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. And always, remember, prepare for the revolution.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
Hi, this is Sharon Bush, newest and most badass host of the Unbuckling the Bible Belt podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you for sticking around through kind of that random-ass segment that we just decided we wanted to do something a little more off the charts this week at the beginning of the show. But we're going to move into a serious segment. As serious as a heart attack. Because we're going to talk about the appendix, ironically, not heart attack. We're going to talk about the appendix. And there was a great article. And it was kind of one of those things, like, the appendix has always interested me. People get appendicitis, have to have it taken out. It never really seems to affect, the person. And to me, it always kind of seemed like a good argument against God, right? It kind of seemed, why would a perfect God put an appendix that does nothing in it? Well, we might have to recant that statement, Chris. We might have to recant that, because if they figure out what the appendix actually does, then that would change, us being able to use that as a discussion piece, right? Except for the fact that if it's shown that the appendix has been not needed through evolution, then that kind of goes against God. So, we kind of got a double-edged sword. So tonight we thought we would have that conversation. We'd talk about the appendix. I found a mental floss article that I sent over to Hannah and said, hey, do your magical, research on this and put all this stuff together and tell me what you think the appendix is.
I threw a few things together, and just initial thoughts on what the appendix is, what it does. Those are the first things that I look for. I just thought they were cool. But the article, where the hell did you see this article? First off, I just want to know where you're browsing, and you just the appendix is a valid thing. Here you go, Chris.
I'm in a nobody ever said it was a valid thing, but I saw it in a. This article came up in a science group that I'm in. So there's a science group that I spam our stuff in every once in a while. But I like to go through there and find articles because some people post bullshit. But that group seems to have a lot of actual scientific articles, and they post this stuff in there. that I just go, well, I don't even know how to read some of these words. Like they have actual peer-reviewed articles that go into it. And I don't have enough time to join in a lot of their discussions, but I do enjoy browsing through the articles in that group. And that's how I get some of these articles. I'll find this in there and I'll go, hey, this is an interesting topic. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, that's cool, because usually what I do is something similar to that. Like I'll see something if it catches my eye, and then, okay, well, this is like a rebroadcast of some kind of scientific journal. There's a cool thing that you can do on Google, and it's called the scholarly articles. And if you search for scholarly article, it'll basically hook you up with like an extension that specifically searches for, these are the actual things that when you hear peer reviewed, like this is what they're talking about. It's called scholar.google.com. And this is where I'll go to try to find something that this is written in science speak. This is difficult stuff. But that's a good way to verify or validate something. So anything that we talk about on here, you can go to those kind of places if you have the wherewithal in the background to find more information that is from the scientists, themselves. But I found an article in 2007 from WebMD, and because I was looking for like what the appendix is, not so much is it valid, is it useful, do we still need it, did we ever need it, but this is like the broad stroke explanation of what it is. It's a 2 to 4 inch pouch located near where the large and small intestine meet. That's usually what we're told in schools, but doctors have debated on the exact function of the organ for years. And since the removal causes no actually noticeable symptoms, so when the gut is affected by like diarrhea or something, an illness that cleans out the intestines, the good bacteria in the appendix can repopulate the digestive system is one of the postulations for this. It's like the appendix is a place where good things kind of hang out to help keep that, your bowel populated with good bacteria. Because as weird as it is to say, there's tons of living things running around in there. And so in modern society, less of these good bacteria are really needed due to hygiene. Like we wash our hands now. We have a germ theory of disease. And so it may explain why the appendix has gained a reputation as useless. If we were in the mud, in the sand, maybe we would see more of a use for whatever the appendix would be in an evolutionary thing, like really giving us some kind of small special advantage over a hominid-like creature who doesn't have that, because that's essentially, we survived because maybe we had a trick that the ones that went into extinction did not. But this is as simple as it can come to. It's a nice little pouch that's got stuff in there, but
good stuff.
I mean, it is. We're going to call it good because in most cases it's not bad. I mean, obviously some people have problems with their bowel, and they'll have to have regulation and they have dietary constraints and stuff. But moving on into just a little bit more of what the appendix can do. For this article is from 2007, so it's kind of precursor to the one that you shared. It's once the bowel contents have left the body, the good bacteria hidden away in the appendix, they emerge and repopulate the lining of the intestine before more harmful bacteria can take up residence. So like in industrialized societies with the modern Medicare and sanitation process, the maintenance and reserve of beneficial bacteria may not actually be necessary. So this is what I said a moment ago, and it's kind of useless because possibly of the environment. So this would be an evolutionary thing. If we don't need it as much in this new environment that we live in, it could potentially be it's not useful anymore, and so it could be phased out. Or like a lot of our junk DNA, it's still there, just because, hey, why not? Why get rid of it if it could potentially be useful? That's kind of how evolution works in a lot of cases. So, but then there's one other thing. There's the hygiene hypothesis. The lack of germs in modern society can cause the immune system to overreact and attack good bacteria stored away in the appendix. This overreactive immune system may lead to the inflammation associated with appendicitis. So this could be a kind of a reason why we're getting that. Because actually, a little while ago, your wife asked me, it's like, well, does this help figure out why or what appendicitis is and why we get it? And this is kind of the speculations. And so thus, our modern society and healthcare and sanitation practices may account for the lack of need for an appendix in our society, but they could also cause some of the problems for the appendix. So that's the precursor. That was what they knew in 2007. So what were they talking about in the new one that you came up with?
Well, in the new one, they talk a different way. They look into a different type of research where they call it the ILCs, And they say that the ILCs protect against infection, for a compromised immune system. So what they're talking about is kind of similar to what you were saying, is that they originally called them good enzymes, that's what they were claiming, or good bacteria, I'm sorry, not enzymes. Maybe it's the same thing, I don't know. But they're talking about good enzymes, good bacteria that would kind of work to help, fix your immune system. Well, they still believe that. They've just gone into more depth, and they talk a little bit, and I could tell you the words that you put into this document. I could tell you the helper T cells, right? I mean, I don't know what half this stuff is, to be perfectly honest with you. But they talk about the autoimmune system and allergies, and they kind of talked a little bit, about how we've been able to see this in mice, right? They've been able to see some of this different functions of the gut within mice, and they said that the underlying of all the body surfaces, including the skin, the lungs, the guts, and the reproductive tract, and they all play a very important and broad role in protecting the body from infections and responses to the environment. And they say that there's a team that went through, and it was headed by this gentleman named Eric Vivier of the Center of it's a French word. I'm assuming it's the Center of Immunology in some place in France. So together they set out to explore what these ILCs are. And basically it's a group to discuss if there is what they can do for gut infections or not. And what they found in mice is that what it does is it begins in that small little pouch. And what it talks about is that where these are is they're near the tip, and that the team infected mice with some sort of a pathogen, and I can't pronounce that name of that either, but they have some sort of pathogen that they injected into them. And then what they did is they removed the ILCs, which caused shrinkage of the inflammation of the colon. Moreover, they uncovered a layered contribution of each different type of immune cells. So what they're kind of hinting at is that they feel the appendix provided a more well-rounded immune system.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's like a storage place, right? It's got the stuff in there. It's a repository for good things. One of the things that in the article they mentioned is when you mentioned a few times, and ILCs, they're called innate lymphoid cells, and these are a group of innate immune cells that belongs to the lymphoid lineage, which what I recommend doing is take a look at some of the links that we're going to add in the description box, so you can get a little bit more information on this. Because what these things are they're kind of non-genetic immune cells that kind of work through, and they're a little bit more hardy and a little more resilient than what your body creates on its own, and so they're very, very useful and very helpful. But it says that they have different physiological functions. Some of them are analogous to the helper T cells that you mentioned, but also some of them like cytotoxic NK cells, which we had actually mentioned cytokines when we were talking about cell function and stuff in the past. But what all these things do is they have an important role in protective immunity and regulation of homeostasis and inflammation. So their dysregulation can lead to immune pathologies. And that's what you were talking about. They're introducing different pathogens. And so these things affect the allergies and the way your autoimmune system works. And so when they add a little bit, and let's say they'll take out the ILCs, that's an experiment. You've added something to an environment, you see how it reacts, you remove piece by piece and see what happens. So that's what they're doing with these mice, and they're finding that some of the stuff that's in the appendix is serving a very specific function and a very useful function. And so it's kind of like, hey, this looks like it's doing something very beneficial. And so obviously as time goes on and we've learned, because like I said, that old article was in 2007, this is from 2015. Well, this one just came out, didn't it?
Yes, this article came out last month, beginning of the month it came out, and I believe, I'm trying to think of when they actually, the actual Duke article, I think that's where they published it in some action. It's an actual scientific resource magazine, and I don't know when they published that. I believe it was last year.
I think it was Nature Immunology. It's in the link. I'll have to do a quick research, but either way, back to kind of like what this article was specifying for these ILCs and the overall use for the appendix. It says that the appendix is not required for digestive functions. It does house symbiotic bacteria, And so that's kind of what we're looking to, is that this is a symbiotic reaction. These things are good, they're bad, but they work together to form what it is that our body does, the functions that are necessary. And when they're not functioning properly, then we lose that symbiotic relationship and we have problems.
Yeah.
So the IRCs, like I said, are hardier than immune cells, and so it's vital to fighting bacterial infections in people that are compromised immune systems, and for just new superbugs, new nasty stuff that's constantly evolving out in nature. They're a little bit tougher, so they can handle that. And that's one other thing that I wanted to get into is the biological dark matter. Unless there's anything else you want to talk about ILCs.
No, I just think that what's interesting, and like I said, the if you go to that natural immunology blog and you go through their actual research, it is a little complex. They use a lot of big fucking words and a lot of acronyms.
They have some photos, though.
You have some photos, and that's, I actually missed the photos the first time I went there. I did not see the photos. I just skipped through them, figure they're boring graphs. But they go through and they talk about it. And unfortunately, if you don't have a student ID, you have to pay for this stupid article, And so I know there's a site, and maybe we'll talk about this next week, but there's a site that you can get free science articles from. And
a huge leak not too long ago, like millions came out of a Russian guy who just like dumped millions of scientific articles. But anyways, the whole symbiotic thing, and I think that's interesting, and I think we need to have that conversation on another show, because I don't think we talked about that yet. And I do think that, it sounds like woo. Last week we talked about the RAS, and you're like, oh, this sounds like woo. But, if you think about it, the way our body evolved is it evolves to get rid of the shitty stuff and put better stuff in. And then as the better stuff comes in, it compromises some of the other stuff, and it has to continually fix itself. It continually has to upgrade it, our body does, to produce. So the appendix is just some other, far-off thing that all of a sudden now is part of it. Well, I like to think of it as the appendix is kind of housing something that's good for us. And so we talk about evolution being an adaptation to your environment. You change and you adjust to your environment. Well, we are the environment in this case. Our intestines, our bowel is the environment. The bacteria, the good bacteria who break down foods to help us digest foods, we are their environment. And so the things that we eat and the things that our body does affect their environment. They survive, they thrive, they die off. There's all these things that happen. And so what we have is a very, very, very complex environment. And this is a really cool area, because when you posted this, when I first reading through, I immediately thought of a TED Talk. There's a guy, let's see his name, Nathan Wolfe. You can look up we're going to include the link in here, but he has a nice little TED Talk, and he talks about like this unexplored frontier, and it's in your intestines. It's really, really cool. There's a thing called biological dark matter, and it's non-coding DNA. Like, it includes non-coding DNA. It's junk DNA, all the extra crap that's in our genetic code.
Now I want to stop you there real quick, though, because I do want to talk about this. I actually found that interesting. That's not something I got out of the research I did until you posted all your links and stuff into my research notes. But it's interesting they use the word dark matter, right? To me, that's interesting, because if you think about it, Chris,
dark biological matter.
Huh?
Dark biological matter.
Yes, it doesn't matter, though, but they're using that dark matter terminology, even though that maybe, in my opinion, is probably not the best analogy. And I guess I'm not super up on what dark matter is. I just, I know a lot about it from Futurama and stuff like that. But,
Matt Groening is your scientific source.
My scientific mind for dark matter. But in reality, what's interesting about this dark matter is basically they're explaining that it is what it is. We don't know what all these things are. We haven't been able to replicate these things. They're just, this dark matter just is, this dark matter bacteria just is what it is. And that's what the best thing about science is they're looking to try and figure this out. They're trying to find where it goes, or what it does, or how it fits within our body, and to see if there is, some sort of important connection or link to it.
We're not starting with the answer first and then working our way back. We're basically we have an unknown, and then we're solving to find the answer, and we go where the science takes us. Well, the other like stuff that I was getting into was just like, this is all like, the dark matter includes non-coding DNA and non-coding RNA, which is essentially all the building blocks of our genes and everything. This is all just mush, stuff that we don't really need. Well, much of this genomic dark matter is thought to originate from ancient transposable elements. the like low complexity repetitive elements, the stuff that like biological, they're talking about abiogenesis and stuff, how life came from just a series of forming of elements and the laws of physics and things. But these uncategorized genetic material, which is found in humans and several other organisms, it's a phylogenetic novelty that could phylogenetic. Like I don't know if you know what phylums are, but when you talk about genetics, there are different categories. Genus and species. Well, phyla is one of those as well. But it could indicate the cellular organisms or viruses from which they evolved. So this could kind of help us go back and find out where this dark biological matter came from. And then also the study of evolutionary history and relationships among individuals or groups of organisms, it will help us. That's basically what phylogenetics is. It'll help us kind of figure out where this stuff came from. And maybe it could be a very good explanation as to how, why, and what our bodies do. So scientists are unable to culture or grow these dark matters. That's one of the reasons why we don't know what it is. And probably one of the reasons why we haven't learned much about the appendix is because it's just it's a harsh environment. And so they really can't grow 99% of these microorganisms. So few functional insights exist about the metabolic potential and essentially what these things can do. And so what I would do just as a nice ending to like the cool stuff that happens down there is to take a look at Nathan Wolf's TED Talk. And he's the dark matter is what his stuff talked about, not so much the appendix. But you can check out the Mental Floss episode or article and the WebMD one, which is the one I posted I linked from 2007. So that's pretty much the appendix stuff, unless you want to add some more to it.
No, I think we've covered the appendix more.
It's pretty cool, man. I didn't think you posted it. I was like, this is not going to be cool. That was cool. I nerd.
See, look, we're 2 for 2 on Chris Tanner's science segments. Maybe I should pick the science segments from now on.
Maybe we'll have to, so it's not so boring. I guess I'm just a boring.
So before we wrap this segment up, though, before we go too far, you had a fun little thing we were going to do last week. We just couldn't get it in the episode called Pascal's Wager and Climate Change. And since we're talking about science, why not do that right now? Why not wrap this right into what it is, right? Well, let's wrap this into the segment that we're doing because it was a fun little segment.
This is something I wrote not too long ago, and I just kind of had... When I'm at work, it depends on if I've got a job where it's really complicated or if I just have some time alone with my brain while I'm doing other things. And Pascal's wager is used so much. People in the non-belief community, even in the agnostic community, we hear them just groan. And so I said, well, if someone's going to lay on that logic so hard, maybe we could spin it off into a different direction. What did you think? I'm assuming you went through the beginning and then you went through the end. I just wanted your general thoughts. Like, did you think it was okay? This is interesting, or am I just totally full of shit?
Well, I always tell you you're full of shit, but not usually at my house. Usually you're full of booze at my house. So, okay. So I do have a gripe about it. I'll be honest, but in terms of the logical ability to move through it, you were able to relate Pascal's wager to climate change.
That's what my attempt was, anyways.
Yeah, the only issue that I drawn with it, and so just kind of as an overview for everybody is, Chris Hanna went through the steps for Pascal's wager, and he went through and explained what Pascal's wager was. And basically, for those of you who don't know, I have a wonderful little thing, and maybe I'll post it on YouTube. I took it down because I didn't want remnants of my old show to bleed into the new show. But I did a little video on Pascal's wager where I put a bunch of people together, and basically Pascal's wager is bullshit. And there's a lot of people that debunk it. So there's no reason for me to go through and debunk it when there's hundreds of other people that have YouTube pages that do this. But basically, Pascal's wager says, either God is here or God is not. We don't know whether he's going to be here, but we have to wager on it. And the best bet is going to be if God is here and we service him and we follow all his rules, what's the worst that could happen if he doesn't really exist? We've lived a good life. And on the opposite side, if you disobey him and he doesn't exist, right, it doesn't matter. But if he does exist, you could lose absolutely everything. And basically, Pascal said, hey, the loss of everything, if God exists, outweighs your desire or anything that could happen if he didn't exist.
Yeah, so your best bet is to believe, if you could do that forcefully, and you can just pick whatever you want to believe in, because that's part of the issue there. So, basically what I wanted to do with this is, I was saying, well, if someone's going to throw Pascal's wager at you, right, you use that logic, say, okay, great. So if you want to say that's a valid argument, let's do that with climate change then. So I basically said that, there either climate change is or it is not. but reason cannot decide between the two alternatives. So the game is being played. It's either heads or tails. So we have a binary solution, a 0 or 1, and you wager that that climate change does exist, and let's say that you change the way we do everything around the world. You cut down on carcinogens in the air. You cut down on global warming and gases and everything. We start doing green energy, different kinds of stuff like that. What happens? The world changes and we all become more globally efficient. So let's say climate change never did exist, and we changed the way we did because we just believe that it does. Then we've not lost nothing. But if you just decide not to believe in climate change and it does exist, essentially global warming could destroy the planet, or at least destroy it for humans to make it uninhabitable. So what have you lost? You should just believe climate change is real, and we'll win. And so we're gonna post it with a little supplementary things like the specific logic that I had in here, and I kind of explain what a logic pump is using Daniel Dennett's logic speak through his philosophical arguments and stuff from some of his Big Think things, his Big Think videos on YouTube. And so essentially that was in the end argument was that, well, you should just, if you just believe God is real, and then all, that'll cause you to lead a good life and do all those things. And then if you don't, then you can lose everything. Well, let's do the same thing with climate change. And if you're not going to accept that argument, then the first time you use the argument that logic, whatever, it's not as valid anymore, because to me those two things are relatively the same because the conclusion is the same.
And I guess this is the only issue I had with is, I guess, this logic is different than the logic of God, because I don't believe if we follow the Word of God or the New Testament or the Bible even, I don't believe outside of maybe the Golden Rule, I don't think there's a lot of good fucking things to follow. And I know we've had this argument before, and we've had this discussion, and I've had Christians on that say, oh, there's plenty of good things in the Bible. I genuinely think that the Bible is shit.
Yeah, I mean, most of the non-believers think that. But basically what I was saying is that, like, if you're having this conversation with a believer, so it's not so much what your thoughts are for Pascal's wager and what your belief would be for that. It's just, okay, if the believer who has just told you that Pascal's wager is a valid, argumentative platform, then use that exact same logic for something that would basically pigeonhole them, because that's exactly what Pascal's wager is. It's a logic pump. It's designed to get you to an end that it wants you to be in. And so I use the exact same things. Like the climate change logic pump that I propose, in the end, it pumps you in the direction of a positive belief towards climate change, because in the end, it's good or bad. There is no middle. So it's designed to make you support climate change. That's the same way that Pascal's wager is too. So like, it's not so much what you think. It's, you're arguing with a believer who thinks it's valid. So that's kind of what it was. Because obviously you and I both agree that Pascal's wager is garbage.
We do. And so, in closing, that's my only thought is, I guess if I don't subscribe to Pascal's wager, I think it's a bunk argument. In the same way, I would hope that we should be able to find more valid scientific reasons for climate change. And, I think that
it's like using someone, like using your enemy's weapons against them. That's kind of my idea. That was what my thought was. Like, that was what I wanted to try to be able to do.
So maybe it's kind of like when I wrote the anti, if you want to call it, or if I were the devil. It's if I were the devil, Bill Harvey. There you go.
Okay. I was gonna say I've heard a bunch of those arguments.
Yeah. And I wrote something, I don't know, 3 years ago when I first came out of the closet as an atheist, and I wrote this and I explained, if I were God, I would do all these different things. And there's been some other atheists that have popularized that as well. But that's kind of the same thing, in this essence, you're doing the same thing. It's like, well, if you can't, beat them at their own game because they're too fucking blind to see it, you might as well join them and beat them at their game.
Beat them with their own game. Beat them over the head with it.
Anyway, so that was a fun little segment, and what we'll do is we'll throw the links in the description. Chris Hanna will post a link to the Google Doc so that anybody can go through it and see what he wrote and kind of give your opinion. So make sure you send all hate mail to christopherhanna@gmail.com and send all your awesome mail to cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. Make sure you stick around after this quick commercial break, because when we come back, we're going to have This Month in Pot, as well as we're going to talk about the Supreme Court nominations. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hey, what's up? I'm Steve Hayes.
And I'm Dave Curry.
And we're from Prophetcast.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics
on the Fox News Network.
They're not affiliated with Fox.
Everyone's a Fox affiliate.
If you guys like what you're hearing on Cellar Door Skeptics, please consider sponsoring us on our Patreon page. Our goal at Cellar Door Skeptics is to help promote more science, skepticism, secularism, and humanism in the world. We want to create better content for our podcast and for you, the listener, all while trying to help promote local activism. We're going to strive to make better podcasts, and I'll tell you what, we're even going to contribute some of the proceeds to charity. So please join us over at Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics to make sure that you sponsor us for as little as $1 an episode. Thank you guys so much, and prepare for the revolution.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics Podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Hey, my name is Jeremiah. And this is David from the God Theory Podcast. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all for sticking around for our last couple of segments. I know we had a hodgepodge segment at the beginning, and then we talked about science, Pascal's wager, and climate change. And now we're going to talk a little bit about pot.
This is still going on?
It is. We are. We're still recording, Chris. Did you forget we were here? Did you zone out, or have you had too much to drink tonight to remember you were at my house?
Well, it hasn't been cloudy in here, so my secondary senses are doing much better this afternoon or this evening.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk a little bit about pot. We originally agreed we'd do one segment a month, and then it kind of went to a couple in a month, and then I kind of pulled back the curtain and said, let's stop doing this, and then I kind of was like, let's re-resurrect it. So we got a little bit of, complaints saying we're focusing too much on marijuana. But, again, we have a national convention coming up, right, where we're going to vote for a president, and I think it's important. For me, this is a hot-button issue, and I'm not a single voter by any mean. I don't pick one issue and vote on it. I just don't. But for me, marijuana is very personal because not only should it be a choice that somebody should be allowed to have, but it affects minorities. It is used as a way to go after minorities and imprison them, and to use it as a way to hold them down. And so I see decriminalization as a big thing in the future. I see it as a way that we can move forward and not have to worry about what it's costing our society. Which leads into the first article I found. So I thought tonight we talk a little bit about how full our prisons are and, the cost, the actual cost behind it. So there's an article that was posted where it says, where is the $2 billion in social costs from legalization? And they're calling this gentleman in Colorado out. And we never got to this actual part. I think we talked a little bit about Kevin a couple months ago, but we never actually got to the point where we examined the numbers.
So what, he said that it would cost $2 billion if we legalized weed?
Yeah, he's basically
really?
Yes, he's saying that it's going to cost over $200 million or over $83 million. And then he said something about $2 billion. And he's, in my opinion, he's begging the question, and that's kind of what the article says. He's begging the question for the $2 million. And where is this $2 billion that he claims it costs?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I mean, what would he even say would cause that? Because essentially, we're removing the criminal element. So we're removing the prison costs, removing the police costs, we're removing the court costs. What is the cost going to be? People are ODing on weed and driving drunk and or driving high and crashing and killing. I don't even understand where the added expenses are going to come from.
Well, originally it came. This article cites an older article from the Huffington Post from back in 2012. And basically, somebody wrote this article that says legalization is not the answer. Ironically, it's Kevin. Anyway, so
Shut up, Kevin.
It's Kevin. He claimed there was going to be $200 billion in social costs. So it's not even $2 billion. He said $200 billion if we legalize it. And that's how much the society loses every year.
11?
Hold on. And it's from reduced productivity to increased healthcare costs, from accidents to premature illness and death. He says drug use is expensive. But he's just generalizing drug use. Like, he's not even actually focusing on marijuana. He's just taking an overall binge and saying, let's pull it all together.
So there's no difference between like giving every child in America marijuana and every child in America heroin. There's no difference there. There's gonna absolutely. It's just drug use overall.
That's what that article says.
And 200 billion.
Billion.
Okay, so that's 11 zeros.
And so basically, he tries to say that. And I'll be honest, I only went so far into his article because every time I click on something, it kept taking me forward. But he basically claims that society receives $1 in alcohol and tobacco revenue, but it costs $10 in socialization for those two. So he's basically saying it's an economic stance. If we make $1, but we're spending $10 to make it, we're losing money. And I would agree with him that would be illogical. We wouldn't want to do something like that.
But there's no way in hell it's that bad. There's no way it's a 10-to-1 negative on society. Like, where is he getting these numbers from?
Out of his asshole, in my opinion. I mean, honestly, like, so when you click through it, it takes it to this place called taxpolicycenter.org, right? And he probably thinks because it's an org, it's got to be factual. You know, I mean, it has to be factual. But this is just raw statistical data. It doesn't come to a conclusion. It doesn't express it. It just puts a whole bunch of different money in what we get in tax revenue.
Well, if I make a spreadsheet and manipulate the way all the numbers are added up and subtracted, I could give you a giant number too if you want. So, I mean, he has to show how he's getting to that number. He can't just like, oh, here's a link to all the statistical tax data and cost data of the entire country. And so that's the conclusion is that it'll cost $200 million. There's a couple steps you gotta take in between there, pal.
Yep, and his numbers don't even match up for drug use wise with the links he's posting. So the link he posted is from the CDC, and the CDC says excessive drinking costs the U.S. $223.5 billion in 2006, or about $1.90 per drink. And that's what he's saying it costs society. Now, that's alcohol. So, right?
That's not 10-to-1.
That's not 10-to-1. A. B, the two numbers don't match up. They just don't fucking match. He claims 200. This one's saying 223. Which is it, man? You know, you gotta pick one number and stick to it. But he's saying it's from the binge drinking has reduced workplace productivity and has increased healthcare expenses. And it says it went down 72% in workplace productivity costs, right? And I agree that motor vehicle crashes are probably higher with alcohol consumption. I'll grant that. I actually think the science shows that that's true. The more you drink, the shittier you are at driving and the more likely you're going to be to cause an accident. I get that. But what he fails to do is link alcohol and marijuana together. That's the first thing he fails to do. The second thing is he's lumping all drugs into one. And so anyway, there was an article that attacked him basically that went and said, hey, think about this. You claim this, but yet you haven't been able to demonstrate this.
That's the thing. When you make a claim, you have to be able to demonstrate it. Like that's my biggest issue. I get it. Okay, that's your point. That there are costs. There's lots of costs. Alcohol and marijuana and any other substances. There are detriments to society for just about anything, and there are also benefits to society for just about anything. Like there's a massive benefit to society for THC, for the marijuana, and all of its different incarnations and methodologies and ways of using it. And so he's discrediting that. Like, how much money do you think society would make using this as medical marijuana as a regular thing, as a repository or a replacement for the opiate addictions? Like, let's say we can get some really good pain medication out of our marijuana, then that help people that have opiate addictions, and so they don't have to be completely and totally addicted to something as horrible as these pain medications that they are stuck on. Well, that's a social net positive, in my guess. So, we're losing some of that horrible cost that you're talking about. So, like, there's more than one side to this stone, and you still have to show all of your steps. Like, if you go to math class and you just put an answer on the board, the teacher's going to ask you to show your steps. You don't show your steps, you get it wrong. Even if you got the right number, you're still going to get it wrong. And obviously, I'm going to say that he got everything wrong, even the final number. You got to show how you get to these numbers. And that's one of the biggest things with statistics and everything. It's not peer-reviewed. There's no way in hell he would even get remotely considered valid or reliable at all without even showing any of that information.
Yeah. And I think what he misses is that we're incarcerating people and we're extending people's jail sentences because of a drug. That's what we're doing with marijuana.
And
we're
that's
saying
a huge social cost.
That's the social cost. You're reducing that by legalizing it. So if you're a marginalized individual in society, you get pulled over, you got pot on you, they're like, oh, you're speeding, but you got pot. That's a misdemeanor. Guess what? We're taking you to jail. We're going to bed you. Oh, now you got to go through a rehab program. You got to pay the state to do, some sort of a 7419 law if you want to restrict it from your license. There's all sorts of shit that goes into it that they're collecting money on.
Or your yearly salary is like $19,000. Here's a $15,000 bill for your arrest and subsequent charges. Good luck on paying that. Oh, you're going to go defunct and whatever. I mean, there's tons and tons of other stuff that the financial sector is on the negative end for criminalizing it. That actually, I would say criminalizing, like you said, would actually increase social costs.
Yes, and it will, and that's where he's failing to look at that. And prohibition doesn't work. And, we talked a little bit earlier about gun control and CPLs and stuff like that, right? And the same way, I would never say, let's take all guns away. That seems stupid, right? I mean, yeah, I know Europe does some of that aspect, but I don't agree with that. I'm not that person because I don't believe prohibition works. And as I said before, I'm pro-legalization of all drugs, maybe except bath salts. Kind of against bath salts.
We don't want anybody eating anybody, right?
Yeah, we don't want anyone to eat anyone else's brains. We don't need a fake zombie apocalypse. But that's the thing is, so he just falsely equates to it. So I did a little bit more research. I went into prisons, jails, and people arrested for drugs. And it's, I'll be honest, it does look like a little bit of a biased interpretation, but they actually pull facts. And they cite where they got it from. So, like, when you first look at it, you're going to go, yep, this is definitely very biased. It looks like it's a late 90s, website. But the biggest thing is they actually cite their sources. So neither one of the articles before this that Kevin posted cites actual real sources. None of it does. He's just making assumptions.
All these sources, too, are .gov sources. These are actual government studies.
Yes, and they're using SAM data, which SAM data is very imperative to drug abuse counseling, or not counseling, but drug abuse and addiction. That's one of the largest organizations that monitors this stuff, And that's the thing is, so the CDC is in place, and there's a lot of these government organizations that are in place to scare children. They're there to help somebody not want to use drugs. And I don't agree with the scare tactic, but, on the opposite side, hey, it is what it is, right? There's going to be some of that. We're not going to be able to get away from it. But this website called drugwarfacts.org actually cites all these different statistics, and it explains how many people are on parole, how many people are in there for drugs, how many people are in there are parents of these offenders, how many drug-dependent users have gone to prison, how many parents are in prison. It goes through all these different numbers. So it estimated the number of people in the U.S. sentenced to state and federal prison for marijuana offenses in 2004 for federal prisons was 170,500. In state prisons was 1.2 million people. The percent of federal prisoners held for drug law violations was 55%. The percent of state prisoners held for drug violation was only 21%. So that's good. They're not, the states are holding less amount of people
out of their total population.
Out of the total population than the federal is. So that's good. So if you're going to federal prison, and it's probably because of felonies, worth more than a misdemeanor is, right?
But it's 50% if you're going to a federal prison, there's a 50% chance basically that it's for a drug charge. That's what you were saying.
Yes.
That's insane. I mean, that's a huge repository of people who's like, oh, this chemical that's naturally occurring on planet Earth is inside.
It's not just pot, though. That's what I'm saying.
We're not trafficking and everything?
It could be trafficking, yes.
Yeah.
So it's some sort of a drug law violation charge. So it's not, if you're at the federal level, you're farther into the, into the felony basis than if you're in a state. Even in the state, you get a felony, you don't have to go to federal prison. Sometimes you go to federal prison. They're just saying is they're holding more people. That's all they're saying. And that's logical, given, the federal versus the state and stuff like that. But they said for marijuana hashish, the federal drug offenders were 12.4% for federal and 12.7% for state. So they're still putting 12% of these people behind bars.
That's thousands of people.
Yes.
Thousands and thousands
federal
of people.
Is 11,630. State is 33,186 for a total of 44,816
of people who live basically completely and entirely on federal tax dollars.
Well, they're not living. It depends on where you are at. They don't live on federal tax dollars. Actually,
for the funding and everything for the states. Unless we're talking private prisons and stuff too. So, essentially, who's paying for these? But we're talking social costs, not specifically tax dollars or whatever. So but these are people that are not working, and if they are working, they work for pennies on a dollar because they don't pay you shit for doing work in prison. So these are social costs. They're not in the workforce. Their families are probably doing worse if they have families. If they don't have families, obviously, whatever, that won't be a cost. But there's the cost of losing fathers and families. There's a cost of losing brothers and whatever. But able-bodied workers in the workforce is a social cost there, and then there's the cost of just paying for those people to be in prison for something that essentially really would not affect their life to the point where they would not be functional and productive Americans. So I see a total net cost on that.
And it goes even farther and explains some of basically minorities, that minorities have a higher rate and percentage of going to jail for drug offenses than white people. And they actually have actual data statistics on this. And, I guess I encourage everybody to actually go through and read this article. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because we got to move into the Scalia death and anointing, because I want to talk about that tonight. But
before we leave this one, I just want to say one thing. There is a section on the page that is an international section, it calls, and it has information for the rest of the world too, which I thought was cool as hell. Because it's a neat way that you can compare kind of like what we do. Yes, we're a huge, landmass compared to a lot of European nations. But if you do, percentage-based analysis versus the number of people in this country, the percentage-wise, and what the numbers that other countries are doing, you can see some pretty big differences. And you see the countries that are doing pretty good at this. Maybe take a look at what they're like. They have very few people in prison. Well, maybe they have very few people that are abusing drugs as well, or they have just a nice regulatory system that keeps it from being crazy. Maybe we can learn from those countries. It's like what we've been talking about, following the Scandinavian universal health care plans and stuff. Let's look to those countries that have maybe a little bit better idea than we do, and we can learn from it. This site just has some cool information that we can learn about.
And one of the big things as we wrap up the pot segment is cost effectiveness of prison compared to treatment. And this is what struck home for me. This was the big thing out of this whole thing. I mean, we went through all these other numbers, right? But this is the big thing. It says substance-involved people have come to compose a large portion of the prison population. We already talked about that. Substance use may play a role in the commission of certain crimes. Approximately 16% of the people in state prison and 18% of the federal prison committing crimes to attain money for drugs. So they talk about treatment delivered in the community as one of the most cost-effective ways to prevent such crimes, and costs approximately $20,000 less than incarcerating that person per year. So a study by Washington State Institute for Public Policy found that every dollar spent on drug treatment in the community yields over $18 in cost savings related to crime. In comparison, prisons only yield 37 cents on the dollar in public safety benefit. So releasing people to supervision and making treatment accessible in an effective way is great for reducing problematic drug use, reduction in crime associated with drug use, and reducing the number of people in prisons. So if you didn't need another fucking reason to legalize marijuana, and this is talking about all hard drugs, right? You could just take marijuana and just do that. You don't have to do Chris's idea and going, let's go overboard and legalize everything but bath salts.
Well, I mean, that's what the Scandinavians kind of have done. Like they still criminalize the really hard drugs, but they don't criminalize in the way that we do. They don't just lock you up, throw away the key. Like their criminalized process is a rehabilitation process. They realize that if you're touching heroin and cocaine and stuff, there's probably a good chance that there's a variety of things that you need assistance in to help you maybe not be dependent on those chemicals. And so they kind of treat it as more of a mental health or just a social health and a rehabilitation problem as opposed to a criminal problem. And they're seeing a lot better results and, like you said, savings than what we do here, which is tossing everybody in a can.
So as we wrap up the show tonight, we got to talk about what happened. We have to talk about the death of a Supreme Court justice and what's going to happen from here. And so now I'm not going to get into the debate of whether we should be happy he died, whether we should celebrate it, whether we should renounce it, whether we should just be quiet and accept it and let their family mourn in peace. I don't want to have that debate tonight because I have a very opinionated opinion.
No way.
On that.
Your opinionated?
Yeah,
no
yeah. It's
way.
I got accused of before, I mean, it'll be a fucking monologue for the next 20 minutes. So I don't want to talk about that tonight. I was not a big fan of that individual, but we move forward now. He has passed, which means, what does that mean? It opens up for Obama to be able to nominate somebody, unless, like the Republicans have said, and like Turtlehead has said, they don't want to nominate anybody. They're going to block anybody that Obama puts. And they don't even know who Obama's going to nominate yet. I mean, Obama's a moderate. That's what they keep missing. Obama's a moderate. Put Bernie Sanders in there. Shit, he's not going to fucking nominate a moderate. He's going to put a very liberal person in there. Obama's a moderate, people. He's a moderate. He's not going to nominate some radical justice.
The big reason why this is such a huge deal is because the Republican House and Republican Senate have really leaned on the Supreme Court for its kind of default for conservatism, because there's been a 5-4 majority on the conservative end. So a lot of these decisions have been falling towards the conservative end. Antonin Scalia was one of the big ones, and so the few justices that are left that are in the conservative end, it's a 4-4 equal right now. So there'd be a lot of just dead even findings, and so the Republicans don't want to give up that strength of having a conservative Supreme Court, and instead of just respecting the process that apparently they never used to have these absolute batshit panic attacks when a Supreme Court justice died and a president from the other party was going to make the appointing. But this one here, it's just an absolute freak out. And so they're saying that it can't be a lame duck who's waiting for the president or waiting for the next presidency that gets to do the nomination. And so there's been a whole bunch of arguments as to whether or not Obama shouldn't. Should he do it during a recess appointment, which is when Congress is just not meeting at all. And so, I mean, is that kind of where you were talking about, is like debating on what Obama should do or what has happened in the past?
We could go a little over both. And how about this? I mean, the only thing I want to say about the past, and so there's been a lot of rhetoric that's kind of gone around between the Republicans and Democrats, right? It's like the Republicans are saying, look, there's a Democrat in place that, basically said we shouldn't nominate. Bush shouldn't be able to do this, yada, yada, yada. It's happened before, right? And then there's an article that talks about Reagan, and Reagan had strong words. I mean, I'll read you exactly. They have a video of what Reagan said. He says, in the year ahead, we're not going to be on the defensive, shoring up problems and answering our critics. We're going to move forward, and I have no doubt that when we look back on 1988, it will be a year of great accomplishment towards our goals. This is a year when Judge Anthony Kennedy will be confirmed and the Supreme Court again will be brought to full strength. The federal judiciary is too important to be made a political football, and I would hope, and the American people should expect, not only for Judge Kennedy's confirmation, but for the Senate to get back to work and act on 27 other judicial nominations that have been left in limbo for quite a while now. And so the only thing I want to say about it is so you've had resistance from Republicans, you've had resistance from Democrats, you've had both parties go both fucking ways, right? We're in today's society. We can look in the past and go, these are mistakes, let's learn from them. Should Obama have to wait? And should he use a recess nomination? Or should the Republicans block him? And I'm saying is the only reason for blocking is because they don't want somebody else's party in there. There's no good logical reason. Somebody posted an article, and I'm not even going to post this one. You can Google it if you fucking want to read it. Somebody posted an article about how they think Obama is an unworthy leader, and therefore he shouldn't be able to nominate. That's what they said. And I said, that's the stupidest fucking argument I've ever heard in my life. Why? You don't like Obama, and you don't like his leadership, therefore he shouldn't be able to nominate.
I don't know if our society now is more politicized than it used to be. I have no way of telling that. I don't know if it's got anything to do with 24/7 news media coverage, if it's got anything to do with social media and the speed in which we can communicate or what. But it seems to me that the candor and the politicization of this is just it's pure rhetoric. It's battle. It's nothing is just given up to. Okay, this is the way it has been in the past, and so. This is the president's duties. This is what his job. This is his job description. This is one of his duties: is appointing Supreme Court nominees and then getting checked by the rest of the branches of the government. But the one thing that I really don't like about this is I'll call it the bunk that's being spread around. Ted Cruz said that the last 80 years that has been this consistent thing that during the last year, during election years, that Supreme Court justices have not been appointed. Well, first off, that is completely and totally wrong by what you said a few minutes ago by a Republican president, no less. So,
and they've both done it, Chris. I mean, both sides have nominated. I mean, Mr. Ed Brayton here, our friend, has posted an article, and we'll post in the links. And he basically explains that. He basically goes through and says, here's where the Republicans, here's where the Democrats did it. Here's where the Republicans, he went through and did that. I mean, it's not like it was one side or the other side's the only ones that have done it. And it's not like it's never happened.
Well, Antonin Scalia, the guy who passed away, he was voted in 46 days before the next election when he was voted in. That's it. He was voted in less than 2 months before the actual election. So he himself is an example of a justice getting voted in by a lame duck president. So the whole process is just being thrown out of whack, and the fact that the I guess incumbent Republicans in House and Congress before hopefully they get voted out come November, if they think they can just what Ted Cruz's response to anything he doesn't like is filibuster. I don't like this. I'm going to filibuster. Well, guess what, pal? If you ever become president and Russia does something, you can't just go in front of a podium and bitch.
Filibuster, yeah. They're just going to blow you up.
I'm going to filibuster you, Putin, so you can't do anything. Are you kidding me? Like, that's like a child. That is a tantrum that a child throws.
That's true. That's very
whatever.
true.
We'll let President Obama select his appointment, and we will see what the rest of the government does. And if they if they shut down the government over something like this, shame on them. Shame on their inability to make any kind of progress and do anything besides a binary yes or no. Mm-hmm. It's just, this is the establishment that a lot of people are getting sick of.
And so we mentioned a appointment on a recess, and I'll be honest, I don't agree with that. To me, that seems sneaky. It just seems like a sneaky way of trying to do it. And
it's like the bill stuff that we talked about where they put a paragraph in a 10,000 page bill. And then once that bill is passed, they're like, hey, remember that one paragraph that you looked over? Well, guess what? Now I own part of Cambodia or whatever. It's like, screw you guys. You can't get your stuff in by showing it up front and saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do, being truthful and honest and transparent. If that's the only way you can do stuff is by sneaking around. That's a shameful thing to do.
Yeah. And so, they did talk about that, and they basically, they say he could go and do this. I don't agree with it, and I don't really care what the process is. There's an article we'll throw in the description where they talk about the process, and I don't care. So for me, it kind of goes down to who could he nominate? Who is up for it? And I don't know. Have you heard of anybody that they've talked about who he could nominate?
No clue yet. I'm going to wait until I hear it from. I'm assuming if there is an appointment or possible contenders that Obama would mention them in an upcoming speech or something, but I don't know yet.
And so there is a little bit. So Mr. Ed Brayton again, and we'll go back to that again.
Man, we got to have him on the show. We have him on here.
On the show. We talk about his ass. He's a celebrity on our show, but he never comes on. So
he's like a silent co-host.
So he named a few people, and we'll post the link in there. He talked about Suri Saravasag. I don't even know how to say his name. And he talked about him. He said he's young. He's 48. He has a real plus for the president in seeking a long-lasting legacy on the court. He would be the first Indian American on the court, and indeed the first Asian American at all, which would make it more difficult for the Senate to reject him. He also explained that Merrick Garland, his name has been bandied for a long time. He would be a potential nomination. Patricia Ann Millett, Paul Waterford, Jane Kelly, and Loretta Lynch. And so those are the ones that he mentioned. So those are all possible candidates. And you're right. We really just should wait. I mean, because in the end, for me, it's kind of like, this is not my expertise field. This is not a field that I'm going to go, hey, I know who he should nominate. The only thing I could say is that if he waits too long, or if they block him too long, then whoever the next president's going to be gets to nominate it. And I would not I would not wait as a Republican. I would not wait for that nomination, because can you even imagine if Bernie Sanders got to nominate the next Supreme Court justice?
I don't know if he would go completely like absolute leftist or not. I mean, I think he would obviously go for probably a more progressive. But once again, he has to deal with the same problems as if the Republican House and Senate are both still incredibly heavily against any decision he makes, and he would have to use some trickery and some stuff to get it an approved appointment. So I mean, he would be able to go. He probably would suggest going much further left than Obama would, but Obama still is probably going to have to deal with the same things that any other president from the Democratic Party would have to deal with. We don't know if Hillary would go further left or go for more centrist. We don't. I mean, I would assume Bernie would, but he knows the game, the political game. He probably would be stuck with some of the same rules, whether or not he would just accept them or not, or he would just go hard line. This is my only choice. But we'll see. I guess if he wins the nomination, and then if he wins the presidency. But I would say hopefully that President Obama gets it taken care of before the election. I think that would be a better thing to have it done and out of the way, so it won't be a campaign pointer for someone saying, because I could see the conservative saying that when I get voted in, I will vote the most conservative Supreme Court justice I can possibly find to
Ted Cruz.
Just to like replace one of the great American heroes that Antonin Scalia was. So that's my dad's. My dad was like the day after he says like, oh, we lost a great American last night. And I was like, what? We lost Antonin Scalia? I don't know about great American. He was a conservative Supreme Court justice. That's about all I would really give him.
And he was an anti-LGBT friend.
He was anti so much stuff. He said that the devil was real. He just got sneakier.
Maybe him and Paul Harvey used to hang out and drink moonshine back in the day. So we don't want to harp on this any longer. We got to wrap it up, right? We got to move in to the end of the show.
You got to move into your new house,
I do.
man.
I got to go get some sleep because I'll be up in the next 6 hours again, moving. So thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Make sure you join us on Patreon. You've heard all the commercials if you didn't fast forward through them. They tell you where to go sponsor us. Support us at Patreon. Find us on Facebook, Instagram,
Pinterest and Flipboard. We got all kinds of
New
stuff.
announcement, you can find us now on Google Play. We've officially registered our podcast on Google Play. I can't tell you what the link is yet, but if you go to Google Play, you can search for Cellar Door Skeptics, and you can find us the same way you can find us on iTunes. So all you Android users that are out there, you can go find Cellar Door Skeptics now, as of this day, right on there. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll be back next week with another amazing episode right here on Cellar Door Skeptics. Have a good night, everyone.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.